Welcome to the Heart of the Soul podcast, where we remember what it means to be wild women walking this earth. We connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling about that which unites us and orient towards our own innate knowings. Today is November 13th, 2025. Our moon is currently waning towards a new moon in Scorpio on the 19th, when this episode will publish. And I'm here today with Kallie Fell. She's a truth seeker, a registered nurse, the executive director of the Center of Bioethics and Culture, the host of the Venus Rising podcast, and a mother of two daughters that she birthed at home. And I was super excited to be connected with you through Jennifer Law, she's the founder of the Center for Bioethics and Culture Network. And I'm just thrilled to have you here today and hear your birth stories and then get into some other topics as we move along here. I would love for you to, take a moment and tell people where in the world you are and maybe start where your motherhood journey begins from there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Amana. It's always a privilege. I don't think I know very many women who wouldn't turn down the opportunity to talk about their own birth story or motherhood, and also things that they're passionate about and the work that they do. So I appreciate an opportunity to really combine both my personal and professional worlds that have intertwined with you today. And it's interesting that you brought up kind of the moon, and that's not something I'm usually very knowledgeable about or track, but my last daughter, who's now a little over a year and a half, was actually born on a full moon. Actually, it was the worm moon and a lunar eclipse, which was just super fun and just things I note about when I had my daughter. And so I had the privilege of having her. She's, like I said, a year and a half now, a little over, at home. I am a perinatal nurse as well, and I've been working with women and infants and families around pregnancy for almost 10 years, which is kind of crazy, as a registered nurse, as a perinatal nurse. But then my story kind of started before that. I have a master's in reproductive physiology, and I've kind of always been, since university, like obsessed with reproduction and how different animals and species and humans, how we reproduce, and just kind of the magic and the mystery and the unknown behind all of that, and then what is known and what science tells us. And so I have a graduate degree in reproductive physiology, and went on to work in women's health doing research, but really felt lacking. Like, I wanted to be involved, and so I became a midwifery assistant and got to assist in home births in Tennessee, and had a wonderful time doing that, and then decided, okay, I'm going to go back to school and become I thought at the time a midwife. I really wanted to do that. But as you've probably talked on your show, or that you know in your own personal life, medicine has a way of changing your minds on things. And so I decided just to stay a bedside nurse and not pursue becoming a midwife, just because of the system, really. I enjoyed the home birth atmosphere and when it's appropriate. And I knew that that's eventually, if I were to become a mother, that's what I would want. I didn't want to be in a hospital setting. And so I had this strong connection to just kind of getting back to physiological birth, is kind of what we call it, a birth without a lot of intervention. And so when I was, so my husband and I, long stories, right? So now I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, and that's where I have my two daughters. But by the way of Tennessee and Ohio and a lot of other states, and moving, ended up here in California. And my husband and I were married for several years. Not really sure we would have children. We didn't, nothing, we weren't keeping children from coming, and they weren't coming. And then 1 year in I think it was 2021 at the time, I came home from a night shift, and I was like really nauseous. And anyone who's worked in night shift, whether it's medicine or otherwise, can know the toll that it can take on your body. And so I came home and we kind of joked. He was like, "Oh, you're pregnant." And I was like, "No, it's just like nice. I got to get back on the swing of it." Turns out I was pregnant, and so uh, we started planning our family and what it would look like to bring in a baby. And we had planned, I wanted a home birth at that time, but we were also foster parents. And so we decided we weren't sure if the child we had in our custody at the time would still be with us when we had our baby. So we decided to do like a freelance birth center that's located here in San Francisco. It's about the second best thing you can get to home birth. You know, they have like a nice like bedroom and clinic, and we had our first daughter there, and I will tell you what, it was crazy. Being a labor and delivery nurse, I was expecting very long, dramatic, right? First time mom, first time having a baby. But start to finish, I had that child from first contraction to the time she was born in less than 5 hours. So it was very crazy.
Wow.
Almost had her in the car, so a home birth would have been more optimal. But yeah, and so we welcomed our first daughter in the kind of at the tail end of COVID. So right as the last strain of COVID hit, we had her, and then right away knew that we uh, hoped to have another child. And I'm telling all these details kind of because it's pertinent to our conversation on assisted reproductive medicine and women knowing their bodies. And because it had taken some time to have our first daughter, I started just doing very basic like cycle tracking. I found out I had one hormone in particular that was out of whack, so I started taking just a really gentle medication to help with that. And we found out we were pregnant when our daughter was a year and a half old. And so now we have our second daughter, and right away started planning our home birth for her. And I had the same midwife, the same team. The doula that I had had previously actually had graduated midwifery school, so she was my backup midwife, and it was beautiful. We had a beautiful home birth, another quick delivery here at home with our second daughter. And um, yeah, it's been a wild ride I'm an older parent now subsequently because we kind of that's just the hand we were dealt and what happened. But that's like the very basic story of our home birth and our birth center births. Very quick deliveries, very um, just beautiful, beautiful time in my life. So, and now since I've become a mother, the work that I am doing is so much more important to me. So
Yeah,
many different levels.
it can matrescence and motherhood can really magnify some of those things that are important to us, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. At the time I was working in this space of transgender medicine, and I use that in quotes because um, I don't always agree with those terms.
Mm.
But I remember working on our second film, which is called The Detransition Diaries, and it focuses on the stories of women who had chosen to medically transition or alter their body, believing they could change the body they were born into. And there's a song that Kat, one of the gals in the film, she's a singer-songwriter, and she wrote it, and it's a song called "We Are Stardust," and and I just remember working on that film and listening to that song as she finished it for the film, and holding my first daughter and like dancing in the living room to it, and just being like, this is why, this is it, this is what I do. And I will always hold that. And now every time I just went to a film festival in Los Angeles that was focusing on the stories of detransitioners, and I got to watch the film again, and I was just taken back to that moment of hearing that song for the first time for the film, and being a mother of daughters now, and the importance they have of being of girls and then growing into women, and how that's my role as a mother to protect that and foster that.
Hmm. Yes. And can I ask, was your second daughter's birth shorter
It,
or
it
fuller?
actually wasn't. So
Okay.
I guess I failed a big chunk of telling this birth story, and this might be uh, I will say that as a caveat to anyone listening, right? Like
Yeah.
I was under the care of a very skilled midwife through my entire pregnancy. My first daughter, stubborn as she is, we were at 41 weeks and I want to say 2 days. I have it written down. I should have looked it up. But we were on the tail end. So in California, a midwife cannot legally
Mhm.
assist or be the delivering care provider of someone who's beyond 42 weeks. That's
Mhm.
the legal, that's the law here in California. And so when we were creeping up on 41 weeks, 42, 41 weeks and change and days, and have done all of the things to try to induce labor at home. And I decided we decided to do castor oil as kind of a last ditch effort. And I
Mhm.
do believe that is the reason why things went so quickly. I actually did like 1 dose of castor oil and I told the midwife, I was like, I don't feel anything. I don't have like indigestion. Like I have nothing. I'm fine. And she was like, okay, you can do it one more time. And then like, that's it. We're calling it. And so several hours later, I took a second shot of castor oil and still nothing. And I remember being so frustrated because I was like, in my line of family members and women who've had children in my family, everyone's had a C-section. It's just kind of like, and I was going to be kind of the first one to not have a C-section. And so we had, my first daughter had been breech for so long and we thought we were going to have a version. Fortunately, she flipped, but like kept flipping. And so it was a little nerve wracking. Finally, she's head down. So we got through that first hurdle, and then now like she's just not coming, and I was so frustrated. And I was actually going into it's called antenatal testing. It's where you can go if they are wanting to monitor you outpatient a little bit more. And I had agreed to do antenatal testing just so we could see the baby's heart rate since I was older, of geriatric pregnancy, and went beyond 40 weeks. And every appointment, they just kept saying, well, we'll see you at your induction. And just even the like the verbiage and the attitude, very much like not supportive of, not even like a flicker of hope, just every time. And so I finally told my midwife at the last, after I think I went like 41 and 1 or 41 and 2 for my last one, I said, I'm not going back because I just can't deal with the negative. At one point, they had said my amniotic fluid was low. It was on the normal side of low, but they weren't sure that they would be able to release me, that I might need to stay and be admitted. And I was like, key word though, normal side of low. I will be leaving. I can call, and it was just kind of this head game. And again, I'm a labor and delivery nurse, so I know how to advocate for myself. I know my baby looked beautiful on the monitor. I know how to read strips. And so, I actually was like, so I took the second dose of castor oil, all of that aside, and so frustrated. I texted her, I have the times written down because it's just so funny. But I texted her, I was like, nothing's happening. I'm going to bed. I'm just kind of frustrated. Like, whatever. We'll try again. We'll do something different. But then I believe it was like an hour later, maybe not. I was woken up from sleep, huge contraction, and it was go time, and there was no stopping. And I remember even going through transition, and again, because I have the experience and I've had the joy and the privilege of seeing so many women navigate this transition, from either being not being a mother to being a mother, or just even their second, third, fourth baby, but seeing them go through the process of welcoming this new life. And so I kind of had a little bit of that wherewithal. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I haven't been contracting that long. They've been intense and they've been painful, but I haven't been doing it that long. And I felt like an urge to, I had that, well, first I had that thought of, I can't do this, which I feel like a lot of women, when they go from 9 to 10 centimeters, that's like the thought. It's like the last defeating try of whatever is out there to say, like, you can't do this, but you can, and you are.
And you are.
But
Yeah.
yes, you are. You're doing it.
Yes.
But I remember having that thought and being like, I can't do this. And like, what did I sign myself up for? Um, but then that as like kind of as soon as I had it, it kind of went away and that urge to push came. And I remember thinking like, whoa, like I've only been doing this for like 4 hours. Like I've got a long way to go. And so then again, all of like kind of this scary medical stuff kind of I'm gonna tear my cervix, I'm gonna do all these things. So I had my husband call the midwife and he's like, I just called her and you're not contracting. The beautiful thing was my contractions were not very close together. They were very strong and they were consistent, but they were not in that range that, we tell people, oh, when you're at the, like the 411 rule or the 311 when give
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
call. So we weren't there. My husband's like, I just called her to tell her like you started labor, like you're having contractions. Like I'm not calling her back. And I remember, and he does too, this like deep guy, like call the midwife, like do it now. And so, and I knew, and I said, he's like, well, I'm not going to talk to her. And I knew in my head, I was like, she doesn't even need to talk. She just needs to hear me.
Yeah.
Anyone who is skilled in this will know. So she calls and he's like, I don't know why, but Kallie wanted me to call you again. And she said, okay, just hold up the phone to Kallie. And sure enough, she could hear just my breathing and the pattern and the feel of push. And she goes, Kallie, are you feeling like you need to push? And I was just like, yes. And then, she's like, let's get in the car. And so, got in the car and again skilled that I am, I could definitely feel my baby coming into the world. I was
Emerging.
like, my husband's going so slow. We had a Tesla and he loves autopilot. And I remember like and again my contractions weren't very close together, which was I was very grateful for, but I was like, honey, do you have autopilot on? Like, why are we going 25 miles an hour at 3 a.m. with like empty streets? Like the baby is coming. Like I need you to like metal to the pedal here, or yeah. So we made it to the birth center. We actually beat everyone there, and so I'm standing in the lobby just like hoping and get in and have a baby almost immediately. So my second one did not need that urge or that push to get to into the world. So my labor was a little bit longer. Didn't need to use castor oil. I just went into labor naturally. I started contracting around 11. I was sitting in church and I was like, oh, there's a contraction. But being again now a second time mom, it's very normal to have contractions that turn into nothing. And I was only like 40 weeks. So I was like, oh, this is quite a bit earlier. But just kind of monitored throughout the day. And it was so wise of my midwife because she's like, well, we're just going to see what happens. It'll call itself. And I think she even texted me and said, I'm thinking that when you put your oldest to bed, you're going to go into labor. And sure enough, we got home. We went to a birthday party. We got home, and I have some photos of me kind of rocking and reading to our first. And I put her to bed, and straight away, the contractions every 2 minutes, almost like like her head hitting the pillow. And then 2 hours later from like kind of intense contractions. And the midwife is like, I'm just going to go sit outside your door. I'm just going to be parked in your driveway. And I was like, no, we're not, like they're still, and she goes, no. And thankfully, she did. Cause as soon as, like I said, as soon as the oldest went to bed, we were in the throes of having and welcoming our second. And yeah, so from her first contraction to the end, I think I have it calculated at like 10 hours, which was still pretty quick, especially since I had so much of that time where it was just very like I was still having conversations, like talking through, like people didn't know. My mom was actually in town because she was charged with, taking care of our oldest. And she actually had no idea the whole day. And then I was like, oh no, I've been communicating with the midwife. I've been contracting all day. And then obviously, like I said, went into labor. But nobody could tell that things were progressing. But still very short, still very fortunate.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes, I've had 3 births at home, and my first one was like 30 some hours, and then the next one was 6, and then 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
I went from like really long to short and really short. So
yeah,
I think it's fun to hear the different lengths of labors that occur and the stories from women. Yeah.
for sure.
So you were born via C-section?
I was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So my mom had a C-section with my sister. There's just two of us, but because I believe from what I can like parse out, it's always interesting to hear, other people talk about kind of their memory and then their history of it. But from what I can parse out, she was in the hospital trying giving birth. I don't know where she was at, but my sister had like a fetal bradycardia. Her heart
Mhm.
rate went down, and so they did an emergency C-section. And then at the time in the 80s, they were still doing like classical incisions, so where they cut
Mm.
from like top to bottom, and so that signs you up for repeat C-sections because it's too dangerous to deliver or go into labor. So I was scheduled
Mhm.
C-section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, neat that you could break that cycle and birth your.
Yeah. And my sister, unfortunately, also had three C-sections, a lot of my aunts. It's just kind of like, and I wouldn't have really thought about it until, like I said, I entered into this world and I started getting curious about how other women in my family gave birth. And so many, my family too, I'm kind of an outlier at like a generally average to tall height, but a lot of my family members are very short. And so I think that like the just the body being smaller, pelvis is smaller and that sort of thing. But anyway, um,
Yeah, I'm curious too. So you birthed your daughters at home, and I'm just before we move on to other topics, I am wondering about their placentas and breastfeeding, and
yeah.
if there's anything you feel like you want to share about.
Oh goodness, yeah. I think breastfeeding was amazing. I'm actually still breastfeeding my youngest, who's a little over a year and a half. I went into it thinking because again, the system a little bit. I was like, oh, if I can just make it 6 weeks, I'll be happy. If I can just make it 6 months, right?
Mhm.
Like we just kind of have this idea that
The
it's gonna
bar is so
fail.
low. Yeah.
Right, like it's just gonna fail. And so many women that I take care of, I mean, even in the moment, like when I'm admitting them to the hospital, I say, "Are you breastfeeding your baby?"
Mhm.
Well, if I have milk. And I'm like, well, you will. So, like I just, setting people up for success rather than this idea that they won't.
Right.
But I ended up having to stop breastfeeding my first in order to have my second. I was just really sensitive to I was only really feeding her like once a day breastfeeding. But my body would not return to a normal cycle until I just had to absolutely cut her off. And because I'm aging, I'm almost 40, and I knew, as all women should know, the older you get, the harder it is to become pregnant. That's just
Hmm.
we can
Biologically. Mhm.
work out our muscles, we can work everything out, we can be healthy, and you might be able to prolong it, but there is just a natural biological clock. And we do our girls a disservice when we say that you can do all of these things before becoming a mother because they're not facing, the reality. And so I knew that. I was like, okay, we were really blessed that we got pregnant. And at the time, I think I was 35 when I got pregnant with my first. And 36 when I had her or something like that. But
Mhm.
so I was younger, but I still knew like at 35, that's your first dramatic like decrease and not for
Mhm.
everybody, not for everybody, right? There's always stories of older women becoming pregnant. My husband, his mom was 40 when she had him. Like there are just there are stories out there, right? But we know that around 35 there's a pretty dramatic shift, and then again at 40 there's another big dramatic drop off of being able to conceive within that 6 month to a year of trying period. And so with that, I kind of weighed I was like, okay, I'm really only breastfeeding her once a day. It's not like she's like really feeding a lot. And so I ended just under, I think, a year and a half because I actually only had 2 cycles and then got pregnant with our second. And then like I said, my youngest daughter, now I'm still feeding. She's been a little bit reluctant to stop, and since we're satisfied with 2. We're just kind of going to see what happens, but we're not going to make any shifts and changes in that. So breastfeeding though is just remarkable, and was able to breastfeed for a very long time. I'm very grateful for that. And you asked something else, and I already
Just, well, I asked about your placentas, or
oh,
if there
placenta,
was
yeah.
anything that like surprised you about motherhood, because obviously you knew mothers and cared for mothers and birth, and like I was the same, but there were still some things that I was surprised to experience myself in.
Yeah. So placenta, funny. My husband is like the weakest sauce when it comes to
Oh.
medical. Like if there's anything gory on TV, like a shot, he's like, passes out if he gets the flu shot. Like so weak sauce. So I hired a doula for my first pregnancy because I just thought he would be like impossible. But
Mhm.
man, I have to say I fell in love with my husband so much more because
Mhm.
with the castor oil, if anyone has taken it, it is not pretty. It is, and I'm just going to stop there in any details.
Yeah.
But it did not bother him. Like he was on it. He was just like got in the shower with me, like helped things. He was there, like wanting to help catch the baby. And then after he got super interested in the placenta as well and like what you could do with it. And so he actually made me a placenta smoothie. I struggled with a little bit of antepartum depression with my first, and that surprised me. But I think it was because we had a lot going on with our foster son at the time. It was a really hard transition, saying goodbye to one child while welcoming another in the home. And so anyway, we did do a smoothie and then we made placenta art, which is hanging on my walls. It's not in the
Oh.
photo. So he did that. He like made placenta art and then we buried it. For our second, we just did the art and buried it. But yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with it. I just kind of struggle with some of the as far as like ingesting it, some of the evidence is a little contradictory too. And
Mhm.
like the placenta is full of hormones as well, and they seem contraindicated when you're considering breastfeeding and other things. So I think you just have to weigh what is works for you and what you're going through. But certainly there's a lot of options that you can do, and it's super fun to get your partner involved in it, which I like
Mhm.
never would have guessed any of this.
Yeah.
But he was super fascinated by it. But I think the hardest thing, to be quite frank, for me, that I didn't expect, and I think it might be because I see mostly mothers who are giving birth or shortly after, um, but just all of the changes postpartum, like just the brain fog and the hormone fluctuations and we tell women, at least I had been educating women, like 6 weeks, your recovery is 6 weeks. That is the biggest lie I've ever been told, or that I have told, I think, to people. Because we like we sign them up for their 6 week postpartum visit. And then that's it, like, oh, you have this visit and then you're done. The transition's over. And I think that's what surprised me the most was that 6 weeks was really just for me like the first checkpoint.
Mhm.
And then from there, I felt like things almost even got harder the first time because you now have this new baby a new person that is completely dependent on you for everything. And your hormones are just, at least for me, mine were all over the place. I felt like sometimes I would even have, and I've seen others kind of talk about this like postpartum rage or like just feeling so overstimulated and overwhelmed and like going off the deep end for no reason. And I think I experienced that a little bit. And I think that really took me by surprise. And I think too, we are out in California and we have absolutely no support as far as like we have friends, but we have no family. We have no, and so to be in this new place of motherhood and to lose friendships that I thought I had, and all of those different changes. That's the part that I think I was most unprepared for. Like I think being a labor and delivery nurse set me up well. And we took the class. I made my husband take some classes, and
Mhm.
I felt like we were really prepared for the pre-pregnancy or the pregnancy, and then the delivery, and then even up to like 6 weeks. But then I felt like after that, things caught me by surprise. So I think,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so much more that happens like after that, and like sleep regressions and all sorts of things. And, when you're not getting that much sleep, everything is more challenging. And
Yeah, yeah. And my second pregnancy, one of my best friends here, actually my best friend in California, we both found out we were pregnant at the same time, and we both delivered away from each other. And just having like a mom to like text at 2 a.m. Like we both knew we were up feeding, and if not, they'd be up soon.
Yeah.
They'd get our
Yeah.
message soon. And I'm kind of tearing up because just having like just that one person who just got it. It was her second child as well. We'd been friends for a while, and her first is quite a couple of years older than mine. So difference is there. But just the shift that I felt postpartum different with having just one other person, that knew me, knew what I was going through. We were able during our maternity leave to go and get coffee together and bring our kids. And it didn't seem like such a big hurdle as the first time. I remember my husband jokes, we have so many strollers in our garage because he's like, why do we have so many strollers? We have like 6 strollers. And I said, because I had this tremendous fear the first time of being a first time mom and going out and not having everything or not being, I felt so like isolated a little and not like equipped to take this new life out into the world to just run errands. And if she cried, like quickly leave or whatever. And now, second time around, it's like bring the whole gang, and if they cry, then they'll be there when I get back from this to go get the cereal from the aisle. I don't know. It's just a very different. But I do think that having that close friend and connection was a big game changer.
Sounds like super supportive and
Yeah.
impactful for you.
Yeah.
So you started going into, I just lost the name of it, but the stories of the women who the detransition stories,
Yeah.
and how sort of those stories have, and having these 2 daughters have really lit you up in this next level for this work that you're doing out in the world. And as we maybe take our conversation a little bit further into that, I wanted to share with you a little bit sort of where my lens and growing up with that concept began. And I've told it some on the podcast already, but I'm just going to cliff notes here, share with you that I grew up with a family of 2 older brothers, and they were 4 and 5 years older than me. And when I was in 9th grade, I was told that one of my older brothers was now going to be was transitioning. He actually did it. He was off at college and did it without my parents knowing, started living pretending to be a woman. And at that time, the language and what I was taught, as my 14, 15, however old I was in 9th grade, was that, men could become women. And that was the language and what I was told and what I sort of absorbed as, okay, well now he is a boy or he is a girl, he was a boy and now he's a woman. And so there was a time, and I, of course, I loved him, still love him, at the time wanted to respect the name change and things like that. And yet at the same time, it didn't all compute or make sense. But for me, it wasn't until I was maybe in my late 20s that I really started to hear the other side of this story and the truth that men can't become women the same as women can't become men, that we can change how some of our appearance, we can take hormones, we can go by a different name, but being female isn't a costume that someone can put on. And so in this time in my life and the last several years, it's become also really important for me. I love being in women-only spaces and having women's gatherings. I have participated in them and also host them myself. And it's become one of those things that I also feel is important and that I'm passionate about talking about what I feel is the truth of biology. And so for me, that's one of those things that my younger self was like, oh yes, trans women should be allowed in women's spaces. And I felt that way for a period of time. And now I've changed my mind and, changed perspectives. And I'm curious for you. I know you sort of got I'm not sure which topic like brought you into the CBC, and I'm curious if you want to tell me a little bit about that and if you're, was
Yeah.
did your mind change or did you start where you're at now or yeah.
Yeah. Well, first, that's the beauty of public discourse, which we got so far away from in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Like if you even challenge someone's ideas or thoughts, you were canceled or called names or just, and so that's the beauty. Like that's a beautiful story that you have of being able to think one way and then kind of go through this process and then think another way. And I think we're always all learning. I tell my daughter that all the time. Because when I get frustrated, sometimes I make her tell me, like, Mommy, I'm just learning. And I'm like, oh, you are. And so am I. I'm learning too. I'm learning to be a mom and I'm learning to do these things. Anyway, we're always learning. And so I think just to start that, I think that's the importance of having these kind of conversations of even if we don't agree, even if you were still on that side of, you know what, they can come into our spaces and they are women, like just to have someone to talk to and to share in conversation. So I appreciate that. And yeah, we don't hear that a lot of people being able to kind of form opinions and think about things more. But I entered in this space because while I was studying graduate school, while I was studying reproductive physiology, I knew of people who had used IVF. I was doing cloning in the lab and doing IVF on mammals to help study development, which doing it on pigs and fish and others is not have the same kind of moral quandary as in humans, but one kind of lends itself to the other, right? We study pigs, or I was studying pigs because they're an excellent model for human health. And I was actually studying epigenetics, which is now a really popular term and people know about it. But I was studying epigenetics specifically if mom works out during pregnancy, do her children fare better? Does she have better do her children have better metabolic function, lower risk for cardiovascular health, those types of things? And so I got to work with pigs and was doing all of this kind of science. But in the back of my mind, I was still like, okay, but we are doing this on humans, right? Like we don't study humans the same way we study animals because there are ethical issues with that. But there are things that we do that we've kind of been like given the bird to ethics, right? Like we've been doing IVF now for quite some time and we still don't have any longitudinal, well, they're starting to come out, but longitudinal studies on the health of the children and of women who undergo IVF. We've been freezing. We have over 1.6 million embryos on ice and we still have no idea like what epigenetic changes are happening, right? So I started kind of having these questions and I could not find someone and it wasn't because people were at this time being like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. It was just people weren't talking about it, I didn't think. And I couldn't find someone, at least in my sphere, whether that was someone in the science department at my university or honestly a pastor at a church. Went and talked to them about it. I actually called in once to a phone conversation where they were like, ask your hard questions. And so I asked hard questions. What do we think as a church about IVF and assisted reproductive technologies? And the Catholic Church actually has a very clear stance on this. They've not wavered and they're pretty solid in their ideals around that. And but the evangelical church a little bit different. And so but I really was having a hard time finding someone who could give concrete answers and kind of help me sift through these ideas. And I was actually invited to a conference by a friend and I wasn't excited to be there, but I was there and I was thumbing through the speakers and I stumbled across a profile for Jennifer Law for the Center for Bioethics and Culture, and she would be speaking on exactly these issues. And I instantly became a fangirl. She and the organization are based in California. I was not at the time in California, but I do think through providential events, meeting my husband, and then him having a job out here, and then us, moving out here then me moving out here to be with him. But I just started volunteering with the organization because I had a background in science. I was able to kind of, the Center for Bioethics and Culture is an educational nonprofit. And so we just really generally, from a basic level, try to bring bioethics and anything in the realm of bioethics to people, whether that's lawmakers, policymakers, teachers, students. I have high schoolers come and ask questions or email me because they're trying to understand a bioethical issue, but really just education.
As you move forward here, just
Yeah.
in case anyone doesn't know the definition of bioethics, could you give a short definition of what bioethics is?
Yeah, so that's always a hard thing to define, but we
Or,
know that bioethics, so life ethics, bio is
yeah,
life.
yes.
So anything pertaining to ethics or moral questions surrounding life. And that's kind of
Okay.
my short answer. It can be broad or very narrow focused. We focus at the Center for Bioethics and Culture on typically things that nobody else is really focusing on. And we have three kind of areas that we focus on: making life, faking life, and taking life. And so, and because we are the Center for Bioethics and Culture, we really focus on what culture and society is dealing with at the time. And so Jennifer spent her first couple of decades really with the organization focusing a lot on assisted reproductive technologies, because that's kind of what it started around the stem cell debate and what we should be doing with stem cells, and then kind of evolved from there. That's when early 90s surrogacy started really taking off, and laws were starting, at least in California, to change the landscape on that. And so that became a big focus. And so a lot of our work is in that making life sphere. But then we, as you know, right kind of during the global pandemic, right before, we had this kind of big surge of people all of a sudden coming out of the woodwork saying that they were born in the wrong body. And we kind of, as an organization, watched a little bit from afar because we saw also what was happening to people when they spoke up, right? Silenced, canceled, kicked off social media, losing their livelihood. And so we were like, I don't think this is really an area we're going to touch yet. And then, and I don't know what it was exactly, but we became very aware of children being offered fertility preservation prior to undergoing
Mm,
medical transitioning, being offered puberty blockers and hormone therapy. And so that became a real problem for us. One, because of what's being done to children just on puberty blockers and
right.
cross-sex hormones. Or
Harming their like
yeah,
normally developing healthy bodies,
yes, and
creating
mutilating their body. Yes,
mutilating.
making them medical patients,
Yeah. For
lifelong.
life.
For life, yes.
Yeah.
And so that really was like, and then knowing, and we're like, oh, this is our wheelhouse now. Like, we know what we're talking about here. And so we decided to end our silence, so to speak. And we came out, we like to educate through very easy, digestible things, right? So articles, and we have 11 now documentary films, which are all free on YouTube. But we decided that we were going to do a film first on just like why, like what is the rush? Why are we allowing children, very focused on children, to harm their bodies in this way? And so, and that film was actually produced during COVID, and probably my least favorite film, only because we had a lot of like, because of COVID, we had to follow strict guidelines for having, it outside. People had to be so many feet away from one another. So we did a lot of like Zoom conversations. And so the quality, I feel like it's there, but it was, during, so if you watch it, just watch that with the mindset that we had to follow strict guidelines to film it safely, and bring a quality picture. But what I loved about the film was we interviewed so many people. I think it's our film with the most people that we've interviewed. But we interviewed parents, 2D transitioners, experts and evolutionary biologists, just kind of get an idea of what was happening and why. And that's when we kind of had this, we were in the editing room and like kind of going through the film and deciding what parts would tell the story the best, right? And we were just struck by the detransitioners. And at the time, those folks also were not speaking out. They did not have a voice. And so we were like, these are the people that we want to hear from, that people need to be hearing from. And this is how, and one of the physicians in the film says that this is how tides will change. This is how we're going to change people's minds, is through hearing from those who have been harmed in this process. And so we focused then and found women who had detransition, and we just did women, an all women cast. And in it again, and I think it's why this film, because we have all women in our house now with 2 daughters and our husband, of course. But she says, Libby Emmons, who is a journalist, an editor of the Post Millennial, she says in that a quote to the effect of, "We do our girls a disservice when we lie to them and tell them that they can be anything they want to be, but they don't have to be girls, that they can be boys too." And or to some effect, right? We do them a disservice when we lie to them and tell them that they can change their bodies. And part of that is we're finding that girls are doing this too because they don't want to be female, because of the risk of being hurt as female, right? As being in a female only space. Like the dangers kind of around it. In the book that we wrote after the films, we feature a gal who had been sexually abused like multiple times before transitioning, and just underscoring kind of like the reason why girls are deciding not to be girls anymore, because of the toll that being a woman has, right? So anyway, we can get into that in a minute, but we focused on the female only cast. We really wanted to hear why so many young women were transitioning and detransitioning. Some women had already like eating disorders or issues with how they perceive their bodies anyway, other comorbidities, and we released that film and we thought, okay, we're done, right? Like we've done the 2 films, we focused on kind of a broader angle, and now we focused on detransitioners and their stories. But then we had parents, these amazing parents, who were like, wait a second, you have not told the boys, you have not told my young son is fighting this, and and so they rallied around and they helped raise funds. And so we came out really quickly, like less than a year later, with The Lost Boys, which is a film with an all male cast focused on why men, young boys and men, are thinking that they're born in the wrong body. And then while we were wrapping up that film, then we wrote the book, which is kind of both films together plus more detransitioner stories. And now, thankfully and wonderfully, there are a lot of organizations out there that are fighting to help children and to protect children from being harmed by this ideology. And so we've now taken a little bit as an organization a step back from there and have re-entered the space of assisted reproductive technologies, just because of the current administration and the culture that's shifting around increasing questions, and finding someone who could boldly answer those questions, and then kind of being like, I now want to be that same person, right? I want to help other people navigate these questions, whether they're high school students, like I said, who are just taking a bioethics course, or whether they're, I had a phone call from a gentleman to our office the other day, that he had, I think he said 7. He had 7 embryos on ice. He has no idea what to do with them. He was not counseled, or told me that he was not counseled ahead of time, of 1, that he would have excess embryos, and then 2, what he could do with them. And so now I can kind of help that. I share stories through our platform of women who've been surrogate mothers, of women who've done IVF, of children who are born through assisted reproductive technologies. But yeah, so that's the why I got into it and why I'm still here.
Yeah. So One thing that really, so when I was younger, because I loved birth from a young age and like always wanted to have babies, but then I didn't meet my husband until I was 31 and didn't have babies till, like, so I had been in this period of like, well, maybe like one day I'll be like a surrogate. And at the time, it was very from that maybe like wanted to be the hero type place and do the good
Sure.
thing, and the way that it's advertised to women that it's, this amazing thing you can do for someone else.
Yeah.
It wasn't until years later that I started really being like, yeah, but what about the baby's experience, right? Because even if it's an egg and sperm from two other people that come together and then they implant that into a third party, a different woman's womb, that baby doesn't know that it's been implanted into someone else's womb. And to that baby, they're, then torn from the smells, the sounds, the energy of that woman. I don't know how you phrase this. Like, I see that person as really that baby's true mother, that
Yeah.
then they get torn from this body and human that they knew, and that physiologically, biologically is the one that they would anticipate being with, not then taken and handed over to other humans.
Yeah. And that is, at the end of the day, we could talk about women's rights and informed consent and all of that till we're blue at the face. But you're absolutely right. The one voice that's missing from this entire conversation is the voice of the child. Um, and absolutely, I don't, I was always impacted when I, hear, right? There's a primal wound that is created when a child is taken from its birth mother, whether that's through adoption or otherwise. We know that. We know that there is a maternal fetal bond that is created during pregnancy. And no matter what language a woman is fed, her bun, their oven, or her oven, their bun, or journey, or whatever slick marketing is used and peddled, that there is a maternal bond. We know that. And we know beyond just emotions. I mean, everything. That's why I studied if pigs exercised, how that affects their offspring. And that's a non-genetic way, right? Like epigenetics. And, we at the Center for Bioethics and Culture, we actually, there's not a lot of studies that have been done on surrogate mothers. And so that's something else that we did in 2020 is we published a study where we actually interviewed over 100, but I think only 96 women qualified for the study at the end of the day. But one of the things, among other things, other health risks that surrogate mothers had, but they would go home, they had a higher incidence or higher rates of postpartum depression following surrogate pregnancies than following the pregnancies of their own children. And I think that's telling. And again, this is the mother's point of view. This is not the child, which I'm not trying to intentionally silence. I'm just trying to point out the data because
Yeah.
there's no real test for that for babies. But aside from maybe like cortisol levels, but she, she's going home. Her body is prepared, and her everything is telling her that she has a new baby to take care of, but that baby didn't go home with her, right? And so that's always been heartbreaking to me. But now it devastates me to think when I see photos coming across social media because of the work I do, a lot of this, the algorithms show us what
Mhm.
we are into, right? So when I see though photos of a woman having a baby and I see that baby removed, I mean, I get
Breaks
I
my
get upset in
heart.
the emergency room or the operating room when we have a C-section and we have to separate mom and baby for health reasons, right? Like either mom's not doing well and she can't do that skin to skin in the OR, or baby needs a little bit of support. That tears me up, right? Like even as a labor and delivery nurse, that is my first goal is how can I get mom and baby back together? How can I get that skin to skin? Because that's going to help a lot as well. But there's such an attachment there. And when I see that this is the way that we are allowing children to be treated, it breaks my heart, especially now after going through being a mother myself. And I mean, we don't separate puppies that young. We don't separate animals. Again, animal science major here who thinks about all aspects of reproduction, not just humans. We don't do that to any other animal. We don't. But yet we are allowing that in humans and infants to be separated from the only home, the only smell, the sight, the sound, the taste, all of that, the emotions. And we're ripping that child away. And in the case of, surrogacy has been around before legalization of gay marriage, but especially in cases too where I see that child is being ripped away from the birth mother and the only mother that child will have too, right? Like that
Yeah.
baby did not sign up not to have a mother at all. And the other part that I really advocate for in this space is truth telling, right? Is telling that child their origins. And I think, a lot of people don't realize this, but birth certificates are not accurate representation of that child's conception and birth. So, at least in the state of California, you can have, and I'm just going to use this as a simple example. You can have your two dads listed on the birth certificate with no origin listed of where your genetic material came from, because right now, as it stands, we haven't quite gotten to, where they've done it in mice just recently, where we can make eggs out of skin cells. But for right now, that child has a genetic mother and a different birth mother, and they're written off of the script of their life as if our identity doesn't come from partly our origins and where we came from. And so there are a myriad of ethical issues with that in and of itself. But yeah, this we are creating a just high risk emotional experience for the women who deliver the children and then the babies themselves.
Yeah, that primal wound that you spoke
Yeah,
of before. Hmm.
yeah. And as a labor and delivery nurse, we really value, right, breastfeeding. We're taught breast is best, and there's this huge initiative, baby friendly. I know most people would probably, if they've had a baby in the last 10 years, they wonder if their hospital that they're going to deliver at is baby friendly, right? Which means that we are going to promote skin to skin attachment and breastfeeding. And I just think that it's really interesting that we do that, except for in the case of babies who are born through surrogacy. Like it doesn't matter. Like,
Hmm.
oh, whoever purchased this child, that's the vested interest.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting time that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people also, like in my community, or people that don't really go down the rabbit hole with this stuff. Like I've watched several of the documentaries that the CBC has and was also just interested in it myself. But for women that might not know about babies born through IVF, maybe just a couple. I know that there's like a long list of potential harms or consequences of that. And I'm curious if you could just share a couple, because a lot of
Sure.
people have the perception that they're just as healthy as other babies, even though it's, they're in a petri dish and frozen, sometimes frozen and then
Right.
I like, what does that do to a developing embryo and human being and their nervous system and everything? Yeah.
Right. And we're just really starting to learn about what's happening to children through this because, again, the studies are lacking because we have a self regulated industry, right? So, why do the studies if we know that they're probably going to show some detrimental effects because then they'll lose money, right? There's a
Mhm.
vested interest and it's self-regulated. But we are starting to see that children who are born through assisted reproductive technologies do have increased risks um, for harms or increased risks for issues later. So one of the biggest ones that we see, and IVF is required for surrogacy. So,
Mhm.
surrogacy, on top of being a high risk pregnancy and having its own complications and risk factors, which will compound the IVF process as well, we know just from IVF in general, children born through IVF are more likely to be born earlier, so preterm or low birth weight,
Mhm.
which have other issues, right? You don't want a child that's born skinny and tiny, and you don't want a baby that's too early. And we see that those children also have increased risks or increased admission into the NICU or the neonatal intensive care unit. We know that there are congenital malformations, cardiovascular issues that can arise. There are epigenetic issues, specifically when you're talking about embryos that have been through what we call a freeze thaw cycle. So they've been frozen first and then thawed. They actually don't fare as well as embryos that are freshly used embryos. So those are just a few of the risks. The biggest one right now, really, that people are starting to really evaluate and look at are like the cardiovascular implications and the metabolic implications of those children. That really need further study to really understand all of the implications there.
Yeah, we'll know more in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I'm curious, do you know much about fetal maternal chimerism? Like
Chimerism? Mm-hmm.
chimerism, because I was thinking about this too with like surrogate moms and that it also, my understanding is that then those fetal cells are also in the next babies that might come after, or that baby might have some fetal cells from babies that, let's say, the surrogate mom carried before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is also a really new kind of discovery, if you will, right? Because we're told surrogate mothers, you're just the oven. There's no genetic relationship, but we're learning that actually that's not entirely true. I mean, one, we know again, epigenetics can happen.
Mhm.
Whatever she does to her body will affect that child. Sure, it won't rewrite the genetic code,
Right.
but it can leave changes onto genetics.
Yeah, and right, literally that baby, is put inside of the woman as an embryo, but then the flesh of that baby is all like coming from the flesh and blood of the mother, right?
Right,
Like
right. And we do have like the placental
body getting built.
barrier, right, that keeps
Sure.
things out. Sure, sure, sure.
But
But in microchimerism, what we see and how they found this was a child actually had, I believe it was cancer on the cheek. It was some sort of cancer. And they did a biopsy of those cancer cells and found that they were maternally derived. So the birth mother, those cells came specifically from her. They were not the child's skin cells. And so that's what we're talking about, where there is a fetal maternal exchange of cells across the body. And from what I've understood so far, is that it can actually be a benefit to the surrogate mother, right? Because of all of the fetal like stem cells, and can actually be very protective, but can be not that way for going from mom to baby. That can actually increase risks for cancer cells migrating across and other things. So gone are the days that we can say that she has absolutely no genetic responsibility of this child, which could also be, again, back to my point about like accurate record keeping and truth telling. For a child that's born from surrogacy or born from donor sold gametes, whether that's sperm and egg or both, when you go to the doctor for the first time, and maybe subsequent times, they're going to want to know about what? Your mom and dad's health history. And if you can't give that, that can be detrimental to your own health. And health is flexible, right? It changes through time. When I donate or sell my eggs at one point in time, I may not know that I'm going to develop cancer later in life that I should have told or be wary about when I have my own children, or what have you. And so this really muddies the water when it comes to children and their own health and navigating what challenges they might face. And so, yes, exactly. Surrogate pregnancies, surrogate mothers can have an effect on the children that they carry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that our time is coming near to a close here. I'm just curious. I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
That's okay. One, I'm curious, if there's anything that you know or your thoughts on like technology trying to create artificial wombs, like what, like that freaks me out too. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, these little beings, like they need a human mother, not so I'm curious.
Right. No, definitely. We've been calling that, and I popped open my website so I could remember, but
Yeah.
we've been calling this the dystopian future of IVF. So what started as a way, and they're doing it in lambs, as a way of protecting children, babies who are born really prematurely. They've developed an artificial womb so that that baby can survive, because we know at certain week cutoff, and again that's part of the mystery of life, is that that's not a perfect cutoff, but we know that some babies do far better than others, right? When they're born prematurely, and so as a answer to helping those children who are born very prematurely, they're trying to develop this artificial womb. But of course, this is now going beyond assisting children who are born prematurely, but into, can we do it entirely from conception to birth? Can we grow a child in an artificial womb? And to me, this just expands the marketplace for children. And that's the question we need to be asking at the end of the day. Are children products to be sold? Are we wanting a world where we can create the children that we want? We can go online and we can select our egg donor with certain characteristics and a sperm donor because, you know, the world has told moms to wait to have children until they've got their career, until they've found Mr. Right, until they have a nest egg, until they've traveled the world, until. And so now she's, doing IVF and creating an embryo. And then, of course, oops, now I've created 10 embryos and I need to select one or two to transfer. So I'm going to do a biopsy of that embryo to select the best one and to avoid all of these awful genes. That I might pass on, and do IVF. And anyway, so, but like, that's the question we need to know, is like, at the end of the day, are children products that can be purchased? Because all of these technologies are expensive, and the only ones who can really afford them are those who can pay for them. Right. And so, is this the world we want to create? Are children products? And so this artificial womb, I mean, really sets the stage for that, like where we can grow children that have no biological connection to the robot, the artificial environment growing that child, only to be handed over to whomever has paid for their existence, who has created and paid for their existence. I think we're still a ways away from artificial wombs, thank goodness. I don't think that we're there yet. What I'm more concerned about right now, um, is called in vitro gametogenesis, where we create gametes. Those are your egg cells and your sperm cells, from a different cell, another stem cell. But one of our stem cells is skin cells. And so the scientists are trying to develop, and they have successfully gotten pretty far with this in mice, to create ova or oocytes, from like skin cells. So in theory, if two men wanted to get together, and wanted to have a child and didn't want to use an egg donor, egg seller, they could use skin cells of one of them to create oocytes or egg cells so that they can create a completely genetically related embryo. And I think that is probably closer to being more feasible. I think some have said in the next 10, 20 years that we'll start to see this. And so definitely I think it's prudent for anyone who follows this, who finds this kind of thing fascinating, to be abreast of these type of technologies, and to learn about these bioethical issues, because they are abounding. And we've just scratched the surface on a lot of this, but there is so much to consider, when we consider all of this, from embryo testing to genetic, to selecting, what, if you want male or female, if you want slightly taller, and
Mm-hmm.
all of the things. But yeah, I think I think we need to keep our eyes open for these types of things that are heading our way.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate like the language and how it's important to, like you said, from egg donor to egg seller. Like women aren't donating their eggs, they're selling their eggs.
Right.
And they're vulnerable women most of the time that are needing money. So they're selling their eggs to people who have the money that can purchase the eggs. And
Right.
yeah, for women listening, that if these are like new topics for you, please, yes, check out. I'll link below the CBC's website and YouTube and anything. I know you said you have a Twitter,
Yes.
the other places where you are so that people can follow you and find you and digest more information about these topics if
Yeah.
they are interested. And one thing that I love, my podcast is called The Heart of the Soul. So I love to ask guests, like, what does soul mean to you, or how might you define soul?
Oh, goodness. Uh, I read a book once that talked about all the parts of us, including the soul. And I found it resonated the most with me. And now I'm going to sit here and stumble through this after reading such a great book on it. Um, can I think for a second?
Of course. Yeah.
I think our soul. Oh.
There's no wrong answer either.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But it's just such a it's a hard question, I think.
Or like if your daughter were to ask you what is a soul, like what do you think you could might say to her?
I think I would say our soul is the person that God put inside of our body, if I was saying it to her.
Yeah.
Um, my soul is every part of me that's encased in this physical body that I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you believe the soul lives on in some shape or form
I
after the
do.
body dies?
I
Yeah.
do. I do. It's it transcends beyond me. When my body is done and has gone, my soul will go on. And I
Yes.
do, I'm a Christian, so I do believe that our souls will, my soul will go to heaven.
Yeah. Beautiful. I got
But
all
I
the
also think that heaven is around us. I don't think of heaven as um, a place in the sky. I don't think that heaven is a far off land that we someday get to. I
Mhm.
do think that heaven meets earth, and I think heaven is around us, and the souls of those in heaven are around us. Um, so,
Yeah, beautiful. Kallie, I'm so grateful for your time today and all the stories and knowledge and topics that you are presenting here, and also all the work that you're doing out in the world. I'm so grateful that you are out there and doing this work, and would love for you to take a moment, and I'll link notes below, but if you want to speak out loud at some of the places they can find you, or specific maybe books or the documentaries that you feel like people should.
yeah, our documentaries are several years old now, but oh so timely. I feel like they just don't age. But they're because we're talking about women's health and children and infants, and that I would just direct people to. We have several films in this space. One's called Breeders. That one's about surrogacy. One is called Eggsploitation, which is about the selling of eggs. We have one called Big Fertility, which is this one woman's story and journey through three surrogate pregnancies. So those are all free on YouTube. And then on YouTube, I interview women who have been surrogate mothers, telling their stories. And so I would actually just ask people to go to our YouTube channel. I think that that's a great resource. And our website is cbc-network.org, where we're always posting new content for people to read and digest. But if you just like to listen to it or just like to watch it, YouTube is the place to be.
Beautiful. And then you're also the host of the Venus Rising podcast.
Yeah, we've actually not done that for a couple of years now. But yes, those are all, most of those Venus Rising are on YouTube, but the older episodes are on, still, we put them on Apple and Spotify. So they're still there, which is really fun podcast where we just interview everyone in this space and detransitioners too. For a time, we really focused on their stories.
Yes, I love that because storytelling really humanizes these like more challenging ethical concerns to like wrap our minds around. So,
exactly.
Yeah, grateful. And yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything else you feel like you need to say before I stop?
No, I just really, well, actually, there's one thing because I usually start off, but because we started with my own birth stories, I just want to always acknowledge those who are going through the painful experience, the agonizing, tormenting experience of feeling infertile, of struggling to conceive, and know that even though I am critical and skeptical of the fertility industry, it's not because I am fighting against men and women having children and building their families, but it is because I care so much about women's health and infants and children. And so if that's you going through that, you aren't alone. You and your husband are a family already. And I just encourage you to really seek healing and to really, if this is you and you're thinking about surrogacy or egg freezing or whatever, that you really just listen to the stories of those who've done it prior and listen, and that my heart is with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for listening, my dearest beloveds. If you are feeling a resonance with me, I would absolutely love to work with you one-on-one or in one of my group circles that are exclusively for women. I have offerings for preparing for birth, for guidance in mothering. I do birth trauma debriefs for you to integrate and heal challenging birth experiences. I have intuitive offerings such as mediumship readings and energy healing. I offer guidance in grief, death, and celebrant services. And if meeting one-to-one feels like too much, please join my full moon birth circle or my new moon death grief circle. If you haven't already, I would love for you to take a moment to just rate, review, or share the show with somebody that you know. If you want to share your story on the Heart of the Soul or have a desired topic suggestion, please reach out to me through email. And as always, remember that we are co-creators of the world that we want to live in for ourselves and for the generations to come. Until next time, be brave, be bold, be love, be you.